This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists only to entertain. We travel now to Hampton Court Palace, southwest of London. The date is October 15th, 1562, and a young Queen Elizabeth, the First of England, at the beginning of her reign, has just taken ill. And thus our story begins in the royal bedchamber of the Queen.
Oh, Lord Robert Dudley, protector of the realm, and gorgeous man whom I love, but am most certainly not having an illicit affair, I am struck of a sudden with faintness, fever, and a splitting headache. Please send for the best doctor in the realm.
Oh, certainly, Lizzie. I shall do so post-haste, my queen. I have returned with the esteemed Dr. Burkott to heal your troubles, my love. My queen.
Long live the
Long
Queen!
live the Queen!
Long live the Queen! Good afternoon, madam. Let's see what seems to be the trouble. Aha. I see. Well then, my liege, it appears that thou shalt have the pox.
What? But I don't even have spots yet. No, I cannot get the pox. I don't care for the pox. I don't like the pox. I positively loathe the pox. It will ruin my beautiful visage.
What's a visage?
My face, dear.
Well, look on the bright side, madam. You have a 50-50 chance of dying from it, too. Then you'll be able to avoid all of this tedious ruling the realm business. Or you might at least go blind and not have to look at yourself anymore.
Ah, nonsense. I just have a headache. How could you even think to say that, Doctor? To me, the Queen! Long live the Queen!
Long live the Queen.
Long live her.
Oh, I don't know. Considering all of your handmaidens are dropping dead like flies with bumps and pustules and all over their faces and bodies, I just thought perhaps maybe the pox might be affecting you too.
Oh, you just thought the pox, did you? Have away the knave out of my sight before I decide to have him beheaded.
You heard her. Get out, knave.
Well, I never. And so Dr. Burkott left the palace, banished in a state of indignation. Yet no sooner had he left than Elizabeth I fell ill into a feverish coma, and spots began to appear all over her famed face and fair figure. Hence Lord Dudley rode out to find the good doctor and fetch him back post-haste. And if Dudley does, can Burkott bear the beast bearing his blasphemous bumps about beautiful Beth's veritably vivacious visage? Stay tuned for the next chapter in this Elizabethan drama of stupendous stakes and smallpox.
Throughout history, this is Max and Mary, Mike and me. You gotta listen, you don't have to read. For historians.
Welcome, everyone. This is Poor Historians, a podcast delving into the archives of medical history. As three emergency physicians, we will explore the unusual ailments, treatments, physicians, and all related material having to do with the healing arts. I'm Max, and I'm joined here by my good friends and colleagues, Aaron and Mike. Gentlemen, are you ready to cast a pox on this show?
Oh, goodness.
Yes. And
I don't know how many pox puns I can take, man.
Are we gonna clarify that as a pun?
I mean,
or classify
it's
it
small humor. I mean, come on. That's just...
I didn't have to work that hard, but I don't know if that's my talent with puns or just not a very good pun.
yeah, I don't know that that's your strength, Max.
Well, let's just move past that then. So shout outs, announcements. Well, I have to admit a little embarrassment. We totally forgot to mention Thanksgiving in the episode that just came out, because that's what happened when you record in batches and you don't realize when some episodes are going to get released. So I wanted to hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving this past week and spent it all with your family members, and there was minimal arguing around the table, as it should be. So... Now, while all of our episodes are indeed special, this one is also special because we have a special guest collaborator with us today. Hailing all the way from Chicago is James Wilke. He comes to the show fresh off the completion of an artist-in-residency program with the International Museum of Surgical Sciences in Chicago, where he spent the better part of 2022 researching and developing an exhibit on smallpox. This included an artist talk on the matter as well as play readings. and an exhibit that has been running up until December of 2022. Prior to that, however, James was an Emmy Award-winning director as well as an Emmy-nominated TV producer. He's been working as a CPA for the past decade, and he is a professional writer that is working as well on an upcoming young adult fantasy novel and middle-grade horror novel, maybe a series even, coming in 2023. He's also revising a few plays, as you do, and writing a horror musical set in World War II Italy, think Sweeney Todd-esque. It goes without saying that James is a lover of history, science, and horror, as well as fantasy. And with that background, we are obviously crazy thrilled to have him on the show today. Welcome, James.
Hello.
Was that all completely accurate and flattering, hopefully?
That was awesome. Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Nailed
I'm
it.
very impressed.
Yeah, I know.
I can't wait to watch the horror musical. I think that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
that
thank you.
sounds
That's
so cool.
Yeah. I've been working on it for years, and I'm really hoping that I can get to the reading stage in 2023. Connect with the local theater here and everything. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, somehow even James not only helped us with the episode, but basically wrote the entire episode. And we didn't even have to put him up to it. Like, he actually volunteered to do this, put an amazing amount of work into it. And he did the entire artist-in-residency program anticipating this moment. And so it's
Totally.
really, we're very flattered that you went to all that work, my friend.
It was very thought out. Yeah.
This is on brand for emergency physicians.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, is it?
We just find people that are better at stuff than us and call for help. That's pretty much what we
Truly.
do. So
It is
this
kind
is
of
what we did
do,
here.
yeah.
We're like, hey,
Just get the right people in the room.
Hey,
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
find somebody who knows, call for help.
Speaking of which, since we wanted to call in at least a resident expert on a certain topic in medical history. Let's let the cat out of the bag. What are we going to be talking about today, James?
We are going to be talking about smallpox.
I've heard of it.
So today we're going to talk about smallpox and its history in the world. It's kind of like it's a smallpox world after all.
Not a lot of people on the line for that ride.
Yeah, that
man.
Disney ride would be horrifying.
As the Disney ride is, but yeah.
It is. It's already horrifying. Yeah, there'd just be vomiting, blood.
It's scary, and you can't get off mid-ride either. You just have to go right through till the end.
Oh no, you're stuck all the way through, going
gotta
so
survive.
slowly.
It's a survival ride. Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, to speak about smallpox though, it has afflicted humanity for possibly 16,000 years. And that's based on genetic, like scientists' genomic analysis, basically the study of the genetic makeup of the disease, combined with historical evidence. Basically, what I think they've discovered genetically is that it's a disease that's been in the human population for like at least 16,000 years from when it jumped from animals to humans. And of course, they wouldn't know which animal, it made the leap from. It's a highly contagious, disfiguring, deadly disease characterized by fever, headache, severe fatigue, body and back aches, vomiting, and most notably, pus-filled lesions covering the body and face particularly.
And that's a very classic disease, right? That is you just don't have a lot of plagues anymore that not only are dangerous. Well, we have dangerous plagues, obviously, but one that looks very plaguey, right? It just looks plaguey. Like you have
Like,
the illness and you can
have the
see
plague.
it. You know what I mean? That is a classic cruel move by nature. That was COVID's downfall.
Yeah, that was COVID's
where
major mistake.
Could have done better.
Yeah, the rollout. I mean, when they planned that thing, they're like, it was not disfiguring.
Maybe they
enough.
can
People
fix it
weren't
in
scared
post.
enough.
Not disfiguring enough. Yeah. So smallpox is caused by the variola virus, of which there are two main forms, variola major and variola minor. Variola major was far more prevalent in humanity, but it is also the more severe, more deadly version of the disease. So that's where you had a much higher chance of dying, and unfortunately, that's the version that most people would get. The term variola comes from the Latin word for spotted, surprise, surprise, due to the raised bumps that appear on the skin of the infected.
Hence the pox part of it. We don't have a lot of poxes anymore. A lot of our poxes have vaccines.
Notably, smallpox is only a human-to-human disease, which I think is interesting. It cannot be passed or contracted from animals. And I think that speaks to how scientists know that it's so old, because we can't even give it to animals or animals give it to us. And so it would have had to have been in the human population for a really long time.
It's like our own little present to ourselves.
Totally. That keeps on. Well, no, that doesn't give anymore. We'll talk about that. So you can die at many stages of this disease. And so you basically just have to survive it till it runs its course. Deaths were typically due to systemic shock, like body-wide infection, and toxemia, toxins in the blood, during the course of the infection. So basically, it's a disease that it doesn't necessarily kill you in a direct way. It's just basically messing up your body so much that, something else in your body is going to conk out.
Yeah, and one way you can think about this, I mean, there's a couple interesting points here. Like, number one, we all learn about smallpox in medical school and then never expect to see it, right? Because of vaccination and the fact that it's essentially been eradicated. But you illustrate a good point that I think a lot of people may not realize. I mean, a lot of infectious diseases, we think about how the disease, if it's very severe or dangerous, can cause death and can cause these things. But as we may point out, conditions like this, a lot of viral infections, a lot of the danger actually comes from your own immune system and it attacking the virus, but the byproduct of that damage causing the physiological changes of sepsis and low blood pressure and things like that can cause harm. And so it's actually sometimes the body's response, even though it's trying to do the right thing by fighting off the virus, but it's sometimes the body's response is the true danger with a lot of these illnesses.
Right, because like with smallpox, I think sometimes it would be really organs failing in the process of trying to fight the disease, rather than it's not the disease directly killing you.
Right.
But, if you did survive the disease, you would possibly have permanent scars, often on your face, because the pox did typically always cover your face, and less frequently blindness from ulceration in your eyes, and related infections were also possible. You could also lose patches of your hair permanently and everything because you'd have the scars even on your scalp. Yeah.
It's just
It's
rude.
pretty nasty. Yeah.
I mean, it's a very rude disease.
Do you know how I
make you
got
sick,
these
but then also
scars? It was smallpox.
And the funny thing is, I think so many people would have had it back in the day and survived it because it would just do wave after wave after wave. So seeing people's faces all pockmarked was pretty normal, back in the old days. This is I find interesting about smallpox. It may have killed more people than any other disease in human history. And of course, this is something like scientists and historians, they can't quantify how many deaths it has caused since it began plaguing humanity. So I don't think scientists often like to pick a disease and say this killed more people than any other disease ever in history, because we just don't know going back. But smallpox is definitely up there, because of its long history in humanity.
It's kind of a cage match between what, Black Death and smallpox. They just got to fight it out. I think that'd be the other main contender, right? What other ones are? I mean, Ebola's too virulent.
Yeah.
Right? I think it just
Numbers
kills
are way,
people too
way,
quickly.
way lower. Mm-hmm.
So its numbers are low because
yeah.
it's just like, oh, oops, I just killed you. And then
smallpox is the old guard too. I mean, with time, how
Yeah.
Totally.
yeah, because it's been around for so long. So then the only other one I can think of is the Black Death. I'm sure we'll get emails.
You're making me think of I was just speaking yesterday with someone who, when I was at the International Museum of Surgical Science, that there is a video game that I think is called Pandemic. You get to actually be the disease and you try to kill humanity.
Well, there's a board game Pandemic where you fight the disease, but I am not surprised if there is a video game where you get to be the disease. I like the video games where there's one that you got to be a shark and you just like swim around doing shark stuff, and it's really kind of fun to be an apex predator. Wait, aren't we? We are apex predators, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's more fun to be a shark. Like, would you?
Oh,
Yeah.
Just be somebody
I don't know how
devoting
it
a bunch of
works.
time to programming a game for like just a nuisance, like be the cold. And you're like, I'm just mildly
Yeah.
inconveniencing people. It's, I don't know. There are amazing games out there. There's actually a lawn mowing game where you start a lawn mowing company and you actually mow the lawn in the game, and it's really fun and relaxing to play. I don't know why.
Do you get paid?
You do actually.
Yeah,
You
right?
mow different lawns, and then you actually get money in the game, and then you buy newer lawnmowers. I'm not
Then you have to
defending my
fill out a
lifestyle.
1099, and then that's you have
I'm
troubles at
sorry,
home.
that's
and
that's the worst game.
No, the best part is if you're playing it and you're streaming it to your friends, they're all like, dads and stuff. So they're all like, you're not doing the edge right. You didn't back up the mower right. You're doing it wrong. Why are you going that way? It is very stressful to play.
you
With
need new
people
friends, Max.
They all listen to this show, so you all heard it.
Oh, wait, no, your friends are great.
great.
But they watch you play a lawn mowing video game.
Yeah, they got problems. I'm not going to say they don't. Oh boy, where
So
were we?
So speaking of how deadly smallpox was, in just the last 100 years of the smallpox pandemic alone, it is thought to have killed up to 500 million people worldwide, which, when I was thinking about that, I'm like, that's 500 million people.
That's so many people.
Yeah, and they basically came up with that number because it would kill, like what, in more recent documented history, they would say it killed an average of about 5 million people a year. So times 100, yeah.
Imagine being so comfortable. Like, imagine just living in a time when so many people would just die every year, and you really didn't know why. I mean, you knew there was an infection, but you just didn't know any of this. That's just mind-boggling to me.
We would
It
just
was more
lose
part
our
of life.
minds.
Yeah.
We would. Yeah, I'm just trying to think how that would look in the modern world. We would. Oh man, think about that. Plus, there's consumption at the time. I mean, it's just everybody
Yeah.
got sick all the time.
All of it. But think about how many people we are. If we, we're better at caring for things like this, but if we got, was it multiple billions more people on the planet than there were 100 years
we're
ago,
also-
just with the
Yeah.
proximity,
And-
we would be
and we're so much
screwed.
better at spreading stuff.
Oh yeah,
Like we're masters at
Right,
spreading
that's-
things.
we can get you on the other side of the world in a day. Absolutely.
And that was actually part of the reason why I really moved forward with this subject when I applied for the residency at the museum, was that I didn't in my exhibit actually make direct comparisons to COVID, but I did want people to come away from what they learned about smallpox with just a better appreciation for where we are today and what we went through with COVID versus what people would have gone through.
Sure.
So you're saying the public health response in Victorian England was not that impressive? Is that
Sure, there
It's
was
like,
a
oh,
response, but yeah.
too bad?
By comparison, they tried, though. We will talk about that at some point. They did try. But so now with smallpox, there is a hopeful side to the story because it led to the development of inoculation techniques first in past eras that we'll cover, and then the invention of vaccination in 1796 with Edward Jenner in Britain. And that is a process which is now applied to a host of other diseases and saves countless lives around the world each year.
I'll say one thing, James. We are not very comfortable on this show with hopeful and positive things. So you're gonna have to.
There's got to be a dark turn. Come on.
Take it easy on the positivity. This is medical history.
Okay.
We're used to the darkness.
We can go back to the negative.
Thank you.
We can keep it dark and spooky and horrifying. Okay, so smallpox holds. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit hopeful again. Smallpox holds the record as the first and still only human disease we have ever eradicated entirely. Yeah. The last known naturally occurring case was in 1977, and the World Health Organization formally declared smallpox eradicated in 1980.
Not too bad.
We still have strains around though, right? Aren't there? I mean, people are saving it in places. That's what I love about us as a species. We're like, yeah, this is gone, but let's keep it in a bottle somewhere.
yeah,
just
and
in
it
case we
wiped
want to
out-
revisit it.
Yeah.
Potentially billions of people. Just put in that lab. It's going to be secure.
So
Why not just get rid of
Tape
it?
it shut. Just tape it shut.
As
No,
I
like a
told
couple
Max,
pieces.
You have a horror story related to that I want to share maybe, at a future date. But yeah, there is a horror story about one of these little little strains of smallpox that was being kept at a lab, and it actually did get out, but only briefly, and it didn't, cause another pandemic. But yeah. So, but by sharing the history of smallpox, I hope people will glean that the story of the smallpox pandemic is truly a story about the whole human race and about how we faced a terrible and destructive disease together. And I'm being hopeful again, and eventually learned how to eradicate it together, as well as how to fight so many other diseases with what we learned.
All right. Well, let's try this positivity out. All right. I'm willing to try.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So I'm going to share some stories about smallpox through history. And of course, this is only a portion snippet of its history, as it's affected so many societies across the world at different times. It would take forever to cover all of them.
Well, and I think I also wanted to interject here too, because we're going to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of like what happened worldwide. And I do stress a little bit of an overview, because we usually think about this from a kind of European centric, right? We think about the story from, what we kind of knew in Europe, and then coming across to the New World at the time, and all of the devastation that this disease caused to native populations here in North America and South America. But it's what I really like about your approach here, James, is that we're going to talk about different areas of the world. And I truthfully never really sat and thought about how much the world has struggled with this disease. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, because it's kind of a really cool view of it. And in the future, we are going to come back and kind of get back into some of the other parts of the story that we mentioned, but there's just kind of a world overview of what smallpox did.
Yeah, thanks. Yes. Because, it is, well, we'll get into it. Well, it is amazing how it really did have devastating, I'd say, impacts all over the world. We just don't realize that unless we really take a deep look. And with that deep look, we're going to start with smallpox in ancient Egypt and the Middle East. So there is an ancient Egyptian text known as the Ebers Papyrus, circa 1550 BC, that described an illness affecting the skin that many historians believe was smallpox. It's the same symptoms. And then there's other evidence. Ancient Egypt has provided us actually the most convincing evidence of smallpox in the ancient world, in the form of their incredibly preserved Egyptian mummies dating as far back as 1500 BC. These mummies have preserved the skin rashes and pustules that apparent victims of the illness suffered.
Oof.
Yeah. The most famous of these is the mummy of Pharaoh Ramses V, who ruled Egypt for 4 years before dying from acute illness in his 30s in 1157 BC.
I do want to point out, though, it's pretty incredible that mummy managed to rule Egypt past its death, because it's hard enough to be the pharaoh when you're alive, but if the mummy was ruling Egypt, I'm even one step more impressed. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it.
And well, so how they determined that Ramses V died of smallpox is because of the preserved pustule lesions on his head. Like the way they mummified him, you can actually still see the smallpox pustules.
Yeah, but did they even pull the DNA out and clone it? That's what they, yeah.
It turned into a velociraptor.
They opened that, they unwrap, the mummy's head, and they're like, oh, gross. And that one guy just poked it. Like, just had to poke the pustule. Because that's the thing about pustules. Curse. They are skin lesions. So pustules, like you can look at the skin, it's red, and there's a white bump full of pus, hence the word pustule. And I think, I know I don't speak for just myself, but any physician looks at that, most of us just want to open it up. You just want to drain it.
You speak
Was
for
it
yourself.
pus, or is it more like chicken pox, where it's like a clear liquid?
Pus, I think. It's like
pus.
icky. Yeah.
It might be like vesicular, like kind of what you get with, I don't know.
So these are pustules, not vesicles.
Pustules, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually
So
don't
it's
know
like
what a vesicle
with
is.
milk.
So.
Chicken pox with milk. We could put that on a t-shirt. Would you wear that shirt?
That sounds like the worst breakfast cereal ever.
I love that shirt.
I think we can workshop a commercial for that cereal.
Muesli is probably the worst sounding breakfast ever.
Oh.
What?
Muesli.
Why you gotta come for muesli, man?
I once.
Muesli with plain yogurt. Come on now.
Have you ever
that's a
tried
great
just
breakfast.
regular German spelt, like just the processed wheat clumps? Oh, it's a.
I've had the full
really
shredded
bad.
wheat
Heard of it.
rolls,
Oh, it's so
where
bad.
it's just the shredded wheat, like
Or-
3 of them in a box, and it just
Yep.
drops in your bowl,
Yeah.
and it's like
Or
this
like
loaf of
Weetabix.
wheat.
Weetabix in
There's
Australia.
nothing wrong with Weetabix. I've had Weetabix.
Sorry, we digress.
So going back to the Middle East and ancient history, what's interesting is, so around 1350 BC, Egypt's great rivals, the Hittites, also recorded a mysterious fatal epidemic disease that they caught from their Egyptian captives when they were victorious over them in battle. And it appears that this was also likely smallpox. So, of course, it was a shallow victory for the Hittites, as the pestilence raged among them for 20 years, killing King Tupilliamus I in 1330 BC and his successor, and I've tried to practice saying this name, Arnuwandas II shortly after.
I was eagerly. I held my breath. I was like, I don't know how to pronounce. There's so many consonants and vowels.
I think it's Antonio Banderas.
I'm not sure if that's actually the right pronunciation either. I've never heard someone
email us.
officially say Tupilliamus. You know.
So many letters.
So another fun fact is that in ancient Egyptian religion, the main force associated with plague and disease, so of course smallpox too, was the goddess Sekhmet. And her name meant strong, mighty, and violent. She was a vengeful expression of the sun god Ra's power, and plagues like smallpox were called her servants or messengers. She was depicted with the head of a lioness and the body of a woman, often dressed in and associated with the color red. She was a goddess of great power, commanding war, storms, floods, and plagues. Yet apart from her violent nature, Sekhmet was sought out for healing as well, and was renowned for her knowledge of magic and sorcery.
That's a lot of attributes for one goddess.
Yeah, they just put all the 4 horsemen in one god.
This is where
Would be
she's
a fun
scary.
goddess to be.
A lot of
Yeah,
other
she's-
cultures, I think they got a little bit too granular. They're like, okay, this is you got to have your sun god, you got to have your moon or the god of night. And then they're like, I know, but what about like the dust bunnies in the corner? Okay, well, there's a god for that. And then this was just, you know what? This is efficient.
Segment's like
violence,
all the
war,
bad stuff.
pestilence,
All of it.
and healing. Why not? It's a more
Devastating
complicated.
bad stuff. Yeah. That devastating stuff that we like,
I'll put it into one.
all rolled into one. Next, we're going to cover smallpox in ancient Rome and Europe. So around AD 161, and actually you kind of covered this when you guys talked about Galen. So I'll touch upon it and we can talk some more. Around 161, the Romans began an invasion of Mesopotamia against the Parthian Empire. Yet an epidemic of what historians believe to be smallpox was sweeping Parthia at the time. And when the disease spread to the invading Roman army, they chose to withdraw. And thus what the Roman army brought back to Rome was not a laurel crown of victory, but a terrible epidemic that would secure Rome's decline in the years to come, the Antonine Plague.
We definitely talked about that.
Yeah, so they called it the Antonine Plague because the 2 co-regent emperors at the time, Lucius Verus and Marcus Aurelius, who ascended to the throne, they ascended to the throne as the adopted sons of the previous empire, Antonius Pius, thus bearing the family name Antonius.
Were they like twins?
No.
That would be weird. How can you have co-regent emperors? How would they not just fight all that? I don't
Well, I was
get
just going to say, if this was
Right.
Game of Thrones, it would only be one episode. Be like, yeah, you got that part, I got that part. All right, we're good.
They were like best friends, I guess. They were like, because they were both like adopted as brothers, but they weren't blood related.
Best
I don't
friends or
think-
besties?
See, we don't know.
Mm.
That's a great question. Mm-hmm.
I'm here to ask the hard questions.
So, but now, as you guys covered in a previous episode, the Antonine Plague was also called the Plague of Galen for the famous Greek physician at the time who described it. So I think historically, really, they called it the Plague of Galen, not because Galen came up with any great ideas for how to fight it, but literally just because he wrote down
Yes.
documentation about it, like specifically about,
He basically said what was happening and was the authority on it, so therefore they named it after him. He couldn't do much about it, but actually, no, it's not true. He could bleed patients when they really didn't need to be bled and make them worse when they were septic. But
I mean,
you know what?
This is frustratingly true to this day about many viruses. I mean, the antivirals are not, I know pharma would probably disagree with me, but they're still not a super impressive class of medications. I mean, some of them may have some activity, but a lot of them are like, I don't know.
Might shorten your illness by a
convinced.
day or so. And,
So like we still don't.
Cool.
Yeah, or your kidneys stop working.
However, supportive care, like people, I think when I say that to people are like, well, it's all supportive care. They kind of poo-poo that, but modern supportive care is pretty impressive, right? I mean, we can do a lot.
We've been doing it for 16,000 years.
Yeah.
It's the oldest treatment in the books.
I think one of the points too to take from that is that, so Galen had no cures or real treatments for smallpox, but no one in human history ever has found a cure for smallpox. So it is kind of like what you're saying for other virals. It's a disease that if you get it, it's just about surviving it until it's gone from your body. There is no cure. All we can do is treat the symptoms as best we can.
Still undefeated.
Now, this epidemic in the Roman Empire would decimate the Roman Empire and may have claimed the lives of at least 5 to 7 million people in the Roman Empire between AD 165 and 180. Some historians have even estimated that possibly up to half the empire perished to smallpox, adding up the multiple waves of the epidemic. It's also speculation, since records from the time period can't really say definitively, though Roman historical records do share how devastating this disease was. And now smallpox may also likely be what killed the ruling co-regent emperors, Lucius Verus in AD 169 and Marcus Aurelius in AD 180, as they were both noted as dying from disease similar to it, or similar to that epidemic. Of course, because we weren't there, we can't go back and test them and say definitively.
I feel like I'm going to go on record and say it probably was smallpox. I could make that claim.
Yeah. Just like Supiliamus or, just like there's pre-Ramses. So this epidemic was the main contributor to the end of the famed Pax Romana, Roman peace, which you kind of said before, I think, Mike, you were saying in a previous episode, so the Pax Romana was a period between 27 BC and AD 180 when Rome's power was at its height. But after the Antonine Plague, Rome became increasingly unstable with civil wars and barbarian invasions.
That happens to us all eventually.
Yeah, it might be a virus that takes us down.
This sounded very threatening. Foreshadowing.
You heard it here first, folks.
Later waves of the epidemic would, of course, strike Europe between the 5th and 7th centuries and continue from the Middle Ages on. It would typically kill about 30% of the infected in Europe, but leave about a third more permanently or partially blind, disfigured, and permanently marked.
That's not good odds. It's not good odds.
No, but supportive care in the Dark Ages, not really that great.
It's true.
Now, we talked about the ancient Egyptians and their belief, that it was Sekhmet. In Europe, when you got smallpox, they would believe that why it happened, ranged from God's will or God's wrath, or having breathed in bad air, which is how we get the words malaria, bad air, malaria in Latin.
It's like one of those cases where they were actually kind of right, at least in, let's not parse droplets, but as far as, it kind of was exposure to at least bad air because somebody coughed all over it or whatnot. But you can also get, if I remember correctly, from the pustules themselves too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the actual physical.
Bad air and bad hugs.
Yeah. And that pustule, of course we could cover this another time, but like the pustule stuff, I don't know what you want to call it. could get on other physical objects. And then if people touch those physical objects,
don't touch anything.
Maybe
That's
not.
the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Don't touch other
Yeah,
people.
or touch
Don't touch anything in your environment, and you'll be fine.
Exactly. So treatments for infection in Old Europe might often include little more than herbal remedies, bloodletting, and having patients wear red clothes or expose them to red objects. This red treatment came from Japan.
Expose them to red.
Oh, think about this though. This might have actually been like social distancing. Like, where they keep their distance from somebody wearing red and be like, oh,
Yeah,
you know,
that
over
would be the
time, it
most
could make
useful
it
part of it. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a non-harmful intervention. It's just
It's
So
like
to
your
point out, this is
quarantine.
unless
The
it's
way
Oh,
less
that's
fun
true. It
version
doesn't
of the
make it-
Scarlet Letter.
yeah.
I heard about that where, like, you know, it hasn't. Have you guys talked about that where interventions oftentimes make things worse instead of better? So if you just do something that's like a placebo.
Yeah, we've
kind of the
definitely
theme of our
it
show.
comes
Do
up
nothing.
over and over again. There's a lot
Yeah.
of sometimes the best thing you can do is not do anything and just wait for more information.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, so the placebos were
Yeah.
probably the most effective treatments by far, I'm sure. Unless they went to a witch.
I would think.
yeah. We did one episode where we talked about witches had reasonable
Hey, man.
medications.
They had, at least they would have gotten like aspirin, you know.
Mhm.
So
So next, as we'll move around the world, we'll cover smallpox in Japan. The smallpox epidemic was introduced into, you know, since we just talked about a Japanese treatment. So the smallpox epidemic was introduced into Japan in AD 735. It had been carried from Korea by Japanese fishermen who had contracted the illness after time spent in the Korean peninsula. Ravaging the country through AD 737, the disease killed about a third of the entire Japanese population in only 3 years.
Yikes.
Smallpox killed off whole swaths of the populace from nobility down to farming communities. It left significant migration and dislocation of labor throughout the empire, with a high economic toll on construction and rice cultivation, leading even to famines. So, you know, side effects.
Mm-hmm.
Over the coming centuries, Japan would continue to experience epidemic waves of smallpox. But by the second millennium AD, the country would have less devastating outbreaks as the disease became endemic to Japanese society.
They kind of, as they start to basically, as a society, you start to
build up enough immunity.
build up enough
Yeah,
immunity
herd
for
immunity.
those who survive. They can hopefully pass that immunity on to people.
Right. So people thought, now let's go to what they believed in Japan. People thought the disease came from possession by smallpox demons, or you could also call them smallpox devils. And so people would seek ways to either attack or appease them. And they actually, when I was studying this, it was interesting because there is a decent amount of artwork coming from Japan that shows this. You know, pictures of what they thought these smallpox demons looked like, and pictures showing them being fought off and so forth, or pictures of them attacking a person that has like spots all over them. Beliefs consolidated that the demons were afraid of the color red and of dogs. Thus, households would display dolls dressed in or painted red to ward off the demons, and patients with the disease would wear red clothes. That red treatment we talked about.
Yeah, I think as I you know, it's easy to kind of poke fun again, but it's hey, at least this was not a harmful intervention. That's fine. Like
Wearing red and getting a dog, it's gonna make you feel better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, dogs. I like that.
Everybody likes dogs.
Yeah, you know. They also would do musical displays, flowers, and incense was offered, even poetry written to glorify and hopefully placate the demons and provide recovery for the afflicted.
Oh man, how did the quality of the poetry matter? Because I feel like it matters.
These would be haikus, probably.
It might be haikus.
I actually, in my study, I didn't, you know, I don't have any with me right now, but I actually did read some poems. Like there were a few texts I found where they actually have, you know, historical kept, some documented
Were they decent?
poems.
Were they like the decent type of poet?
It's interesting.
Like if somebody was performing it, like let's say you were at a dinner party and somebody was like, I
Like
wrote a
slam
poem,
poetry.
I'd like to share it with everybody. And you know, it's that you're gonna have to sit there awkwardly, politely when you're just like, this
Max is a
bad.
poetry skeptic.
I am a poetry skeptic. And so like you have that kind of poem. I feel like the demons are like, no, we're coming right in.
Demons are like, who's reading the poetry? I got you first.
I hate that poetry, or I love it. I don't know. Maybe that's another treatment we could think about for other things.
Which poets were best for which diseases? Yeah, we could definitely come up with a list.
Ode to. So the Japanese red treatment, as we just discussed a minute ago or a little bit ago, even spread to Europe in the Middle Ages with King Charles V of France in the 1300s and even Queen Elizabeth I of England in the 1500s, both wearing red to aid their own recoveries from the disease.
Cool.
Next, we'll talk about smallpox in Africa. Aside from its existence already in Egypt and the Middle East, smallpox spread to the regions of northern Africa, Spain, and Portugal during the Arab expansion beginning in the 7th century. Then, when Portugal occupied parts of Western Africa in the 15th century, it brought smallpox into kingdoms and civilizations of Western and Central Africa that had never suffered from the disease before.
And I think that's one of the things, too, like people who have never met this disease, especially like indigenous populations in North America. It's and kind of going back to your mention of Japan, you take this disease, put it into a big population of people whose immune systems have never seen this before. And that's where it hits really hard in the beginning. And so it's just, it's always, you hear this. This is a lot of the concern for visiting indigenous populations today, like the people who live on the North Sentinel Island out off the coast of India. They protect that island because those people who live there have done so forever, basically, and they have no exposure to your regular diseases. They've not left the island in thousands of years. And so any one person wandering to the island, if they don't shoot you with arrows, which I think they're very justified in doing, if you make it on there and you give a common cold or something like that, that for us is not a big deal. You don't know what it's going to do to an immune system that's never seen anything like that. So that's kind of impress upon how quickly a novel virus like this could decimate a population, especially if it's able to cause severe disease.
And it's interesting because, when you look at this history, since it's before airplanes and trains and all that, it's interesting to see how, like, every time it gets introduced in a new part of the world, you get that same terrifying story where, like, a huge percentage of the population is decimated really quickly, and then those remaining slowly
start to rebuild.
Start to rebuild and have a little bit stronger immune systems to fight the disease in the future.
I mean, thank goodness that the Portuguese otherwise were a positive influence, didn't bring anything else with them that was bad.
Gosh.
I think it's funny that same continent, 800 years goes by, in between these two plagues.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. It's interesting.
Yep.
Like they were fine. And then, you get some
Western Africa, Egypt, and the Middle East. So, is it the Sahara that's keeping people apart? I don't know.
Probably.
Oh, yeah. Why those civilizations were kind of separated.
Mm.
Yeah. Like regionally. I don't know. That's a good historical study. But, you did have, like once when Islam spread across all of North Africa, when the Arabs came across, that, as I was saying, that also came with it a wave of smallpox. And then, of course, when the Portuguese come to Western and Central Africa later, those civilizations hadn't really gotten hit with smallpox before that. So historical journals confirm that by 1700, West African peoples had adopted inoculation practices, which we also call variolation. So what this is a bleeding scratch would be made on one's arm into which fluid from the pustules or powdered scabs from someone who had smallpox would be rubbed in. The practice may have been adopted from travelers crossing the Sahara Desert from the Middle East, or it may have developed independently in West Africa. Though earlier documentation of the origin of this practice is not available. But we do know that these practices also had a history in Asia and the Middle East.
I wonder, did this lead to a less severe form of the illness?
Yes.
Gotcha.
So basically, if you had that done to you, what they discovered was that you would just get a much more mild version. Typically, you would get a much more mild version of the illness. I think in some of what I read, what I studied, they said that you might still have, and of course this sounds still devastating by today's standards, you might still have a 1 or 2% chance of dying from smallpox if you got inoculated or variolated, but that's so much better than like a 30
Yeah, I was
to
gonna say.
30%, yeah.
It's improving the odds.
Yeah, so populations that did this, as they did in Africa and also sometimes in the Middle East and Asia, would be much more well protected. So now, speaking about what some African peoples believed related to smallpox, the worship of Sapona or Shapona, the Yoruba people's god of smallpox and infectious disease, dates at least as far back as the 17th century in regions around Nigeria. If he is angry, Sapona can strike one down with smallpox and curse them to die. Yet he also has the power to cure and thus has had a devout following. He is also referred to as Omolu and other names to avoid speaking his true name and possibly invoking the power of the disease. Brought to the Americas during the slave trade, he is known as Sakpata in Brazil, Shakpana in Trinidad, and Babalu Aye in Cuba and elsewhere in the Caribbean, where he is blended with Catholicism as Saint Lazarus, who is a patron saint of the poor and sick. In Cuba and elsewhere, the festival of Saint Lazarus is celebrated on December 17th, when the spirit of Babalu Aye is honored by followers.
It's crazy to think how many different cultures basically had, adopted this disease and how, or had adopted the beliefs to try to explain this. I mean, there's so many different, we've already talked about many different religious, kind of ideas about what caused this. And it's just kind of cool to see how different cultures kind of wrestled with this idea of this invisible force that we know now is a virus that was causing this widespread death and despair. And, they have to explain it somehow, right? I mean, how else? I guess you got to explain it somehow. And I can certainly understand the creativity behind a lot of these beliefs,
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking it's so far before we knew, before germ theory, before which we could, I'm sure you guys cover that on a lot of things, but before germ theory, before you knew viruses existed, you have to come up with some kind of explanation.
Mm-hmm. People need an explanation. Yeah, and I'm one of them. I need an explanation for things, so I don't begrudge that at all.
Hello, gentlemen. May I interrupt with the conclusion to our earlier historic viewing?
Oh, hey, computer. Go ahead, throw it on screen. We now return to our previously paused Elizabethan drama of stupendous stakes and smallpox. The date is still October 15, 1562, and an entire nation is in distress over the potential loss of their beloved British monarch. Yet it appears that Lord Dudley has finally found our good doctor, hiding in no other place but his house. Hello?
Oh, there you are, Dr. Burkott. The Queen needs you back at the palace at once.
Long live the Queen!
Long live the Queen!
Oh, you again. But I just left the palace. Liz threw me out, remember? Me, the best doctor in the realm, just for saying she's got the pox.
Yes, but you were right after all, my good man. She does have the pox.
For Pete's pestilence, if she be sick, let her die. Call me a knave. For my goodwill.
Oh, come now. You can't take it too personally. I mean, she had a headache.
No, I'm not going back.
Well then, if you won't come back to the palace and save her, I'll just have to cut your head off right here and bring that back instead. It won't save Lizzie's life, but it might cheer her up a bit. We could just toss your head around, make a game or cricket out of it or something like that.
All right, fine. I'll go back to the palace and save the Queen.
Long live the Queen!
The Queen!
You don't have to get all head loppity-offity about it, dear me. And so Dr. Burkott returned to the palace, and with a bit of skill and perhaps a little chicanery, he miraculously saved the Queen of England from a deadly case of smallpox. Long live the Queen!
Long live the Queen!
Who are all these people saying that?
Bravo, old chap. How did you ever manage it?
Well, first off, I wrapped the Queen in a great length of scarlet cloth, as the color red is particularly good at fighting the evil demons that cause smallpox. Next, I did some bloodletting, followed by placing the Queen close by the fire during the peak of her fever. Add to that a concoction of disgustingly bitter herbs, which I regularly make her drink. In other words, I use the vast, incredible healing power of that special substance known as pure and unrefined luck. It was just luck.
My good Dr. Burkhardt, to thank you for your bravery and skill, I hereby grant you 100 marks.
Your Majesty is most kind. My usual fee is 200.
I'm not finished. Also, a pair of gold spurs once owned by my grandfather, Henry VII.
Just what I always wanted, a pair of gold spurs. Very practical.
And a plot of land in Cornwall.
Well, I hope it's a good plot.
I have no idea. You'll just have to check it out for yourself. Now, where is my mirror? I need to see what I look like. There it is. Oh, dear me, Dr. Burkhardt, I look dreadful.
Well, don't look at me for help there. Damn it, Liz, I'm a doctor, not a magician.
Oh, a pox on both your houses, then.
Oh, don't worry, my illicit love. I mean, my queen.
Long
live the Queen.
Long live the Queen.
You just need the royal beautician. Oh, royal beautician.
Did somebody call for me?
Yes, as you can see, I've had a bad case of the pox. My skin is covered in pockmarks now, and I dare say my hair is falling out. I look positively awful. How will I ever get a man? Not that I want one.
Girl, chill. I got you. Don't even sweat it. I've got a fabulous assortment of fierce wigs right over here. And like the best new foundation and concealer on the market for those pockmarks on your face. It's got a special new ingredient that'll give you that healthy, ghostly glow that's so popular these days.
What special ingredient?
It's called lead, baby. It does wonders for the complexion. We'll just slather it on. Now, let the master get to work so we can have you looking fierce like a real queen, okay?
Long
live the Queen.
And thus, Queen Elizabeth I was saved from the scourge of smallpox and went on to rule England, looking fierce for another 41 years. You go, girl. You go. Wow, that had to have been accurate. There was no way that our time portal got that wrong.
Super
I
accurate.
bet with the lead makeup, her face was heavy. You think it was heavy?
No.
Well, she was a heavy personality. No, I don't know. I don't know if this is true, but I know that when there was, people said that there was like something like an inch of caked makeup on her face, like when she passed away. But it can't be an inch, but a lot of caked on makeup, because I think it would, people wouldn't necessarily bathe.
That's a skim coating and drywalling.
Like they'd keep applying the makeup, but not necessarily take it off all the time.
I mean, it sounds like a hassle to take it off.
How did her face move when she tried to talk? It's very stoic.
Yeah.
Like stoicism started with her.
It's like Botox for, an earlier time.
Earlier generation.
If you were wearing lead makeup all day and it was like super heavy, I bet you like tone your facial muscles though.
Every time you smile.
Yep. We were taking a tour of the world, and I think we left off. We're going to India next.
Yeah, so smallpox in India. Let's discuss that. Trade along the Silk Roads goes deep into ancient times. Some historians believe that smallpox too was carried to the Indian subcontinent from Egypt with trade sometime in the first millennium BC. The Susruta Samhita, a Sanskrit text on medicine and surgery dating to about the 6th century BC, describes quite accurately the symptoms of smallpox, including the fever, joint pains, shaking, languor, and pustules. Ancient records also tell of Alexander the Great's army suffering a fatal illness, including rash, possibly smallpox, in 327 BC while camped in the lower Indus Valley, which is in present-day India. Dating at least as far back as the early 16th century, a Hindu goddess of smallpox, Shitala, or also spelled or said Sitala or Sitla, meaning the cool one, has been worshipped in northern and central India and Nepal. She is often depicted dressed in red as well, sometimes with polka dots, sitting side saddle, riding a donkey. Or she can be shown angry, standing with daggers in her hands, ready to strike. She is believed to be both a bringer of smallpox and able to help those suffering from it.
I feel like the translation there is missing some nuance. The cool one.
The cool
See, now it's Henry
cool.
Winkler. He's the cool one. The Fonz.
I'm trying to understand that. The cool one. Like, cool.
It's got to be.
Maybe having to do
we're
with the
missing some
fever?
context there.
Yeah. Like she can control the fever.
Oh. Yeah, like maybe to cool you down from fever if she's the one you would pray or give offerings to.
Like you see her riding
solve
a donkey side saddle, you're like, you get hot and bothered. And then she pulls out the knives to cool you down.
I mean, the knives are pretty cool.
They are cool. Sounds like a kind of a cool gig.
Just leave it at cool, like radical.
That goes back to at least the 1290s. That expression.
That's good to know. So next in our it's a smallpox world after all. We're going to cover smallpox in China. Chinese texts refer to a destructive epidemic that swept their empire in 243 BC, believed to have been smallpox. It arrived with the Huns only decades before the completion of the Great Wall of China to keep them out. The Chinese, in fact, called the disease Hunpox.
The tradition of naming infectious diseases after your enemies has a long-standing history.
Yup, sure does. Sure does. Spanish flu
Don't we know
has
it?
Entered the chat.
No, we know why it was Spanish flu, because they reported on it first.
Well, I know,
yeah.
but then they named it after them in a pejorative way. So, just saying, it's a nice little dig at the other,
Right. Like blame your enemies, name it after them.
Fortunately, we've evolved way past that in the modern age.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore. Hunpox has got to be the cutest name, though. Oh, you have the Hunpox.
It is kind of a cute name, to be honest.
I think that's also lost in translation there. Dating as far back as the 16th century, the Chinese developed an indigenous form of variolation, which we also call inoculation, whereby dry smallpox scabs would be ground into powder and blown up the nose through a straw for those who had never had it.
Doing lines of smallpox pustule more or less safe than cocaine.
Like, I've seen pictures of it too, so they would have these really long straws, and so the person, one person would take some of this dry, ground up smallpox, yummy stuff, stick it at the end of the straw, and then they would, put that up into the other person's nose and then just blow it in.
So wait, they would fire it like a spitball down your nose?
I think.
That sounds really unpleasant.
They just had these lying around. There's no other reason that we can possibly think of why they would have straws for powdered substances. Just as a coincidence, they
just
had
think
a few
of the landfills back
around.
then. Yeah,
that's true. Like, where would they have come up with that idea?
They have no idea.
Just sitting around the campfire. Hey, can I get a bump?
A smallpox bump.
Yeah.
A bump of smallpox.
The reverse spitball at the nose.
Oh my God. But yeah, if that were to happen to me, honestly, it would go up my nose, it would hit the back of my uvula, and I would just puke it out right away. I wouldn't even get inoculated.
We've been trying to figure out a way to work in some video content, Mike. I think we need to test that.
Oh,
wow.
No.
So, now another Chinese, blah, 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 let me go back. So another one of the Chinese versions of variolation, inoculation, would be that they would use fluid from smallpox pustules that they would gather on a cotton plug that would likewise also be stuck up the nose.
That sounds more pleasant. Still gross, but more pleasant.
But it seemingly makes sense, too. It's like they knew well enough where this would be where the infection occurs. Brilliant.
Yep. Yeah.
They could have put it in any other hole.
I think it might have. Yeah, but fair. They picked the better one.
Could there have been testing along the way? Like,
probably, honestly.
Stick it here, we'll stick it there. Like, we stick it in your ear, it doesn't really do much of anything.
Or good thing you don't get diarrhea with this, because you know where that'll go next.
Yeah.
The spitball up the...
Nope. Move past that thought experiment.
I'm just saying.
I know you.
They picked the nose appropriately.
Pick the nose. I see what you did there.
And of course, when they did these things, a level of protection from smallpox was achieved, so patients would only suffer minor symptoms. Kind of like the other form of inoculation we talked about in Africa. You'd get a reduced version of the disease. And that's where we'll stop for this episode on the history of the smallpox pandemic before the discovery, invention of vaccination, and distribution of smallpox vaccines around the world through the 1800s and 1900s, and eventual eradication in 1980. We'll also cover the devastation that smallpox did upon the Americas. we will save that for this next episode.
And then we'll have a bright ending to that episode. We'll try it out. I guess what that means is that's probably all we have time for today. So, well, many thanks once again to our guest, James Wilke. If our listeners are looking for more information, go over to the show notes to check out links to his social media accounts and as well as to check out links to the museum. He did his artist-in-residency experience at the International Museum of Surgical Science. And we will have that all linked. So appreciate everyone listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you out there. If you'd like to send us a message or provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.forhistorianspod.com. There you will find links to our social media sites. We do take emails at forhistorianspod@gmail.com, and we work to respond to all posts on our various social media accounts. If you have time, please go and leave us a nice 5-star review on iTunes or whichever platform you choose. That does help us raise the profile of our show and get more audience. And if you'd like to support the show in other ways, check out our For Historians merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, etc., over on our website. And if you're old-fashioned, post a bill to the side of a building, but be aware of those post no bill signs. That's how they get you. Until next time, the For Historians are signing out AMA.
Long live the Queen.
Long live the Queen. I was going to throw it in there. I figured I'd let you finish.
I'm good to be Queen Elizabeth if you want me to do the girl voice, or if one of you guys would prefer that for fun. And, it just depends on what you guys feel.
Oh, we lost our Shane a long time ago. If you want to do Queen Elizabeth,
that works perfect.
I'll do Dr. Burkott. I think Aaron sounds more lordly.
Yeah, he is lordly.
Yeah, that's fair. And then
pish posh.
Cool.
Yep. See, there you go. And then Aaron, you'll come in second. Oh, sorry, not Aaron. Mike, you'll come in second skit.
All I've got to do is act like my true self, superior to all of you. Are we doing Long Live the Queen?
Oh, taste.
Oh, jeez. All right.
Oh, long live the Queen.
Long live the Queen.
Long live the Queen.
Who's that guy? But will Dodling Dudley dare discover the distinguished doctor? And if Dudley does, can Burkott beat the beast bearing its blasphemous bumps about its beautiful Beth's belief? You got me. He's not going to trip me up.
That's an outtake.
I was waiting for this moment.
I read the alliteration. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, I love it. You gotcha.
That was almost a one taker.
You're so close.
I really was. My brain just lost footing.
Royal Beautician.
Mike.
All right. I was prepared. All right, ready? Did somebody call for me?